It's a faithful endurance in the face of persecution by the Roman imperial state. It was not just the Roman imperial state, but it was the Rome's collaborators, kings, merchants, seafarers, and also trade guilds at a local level, so that there's peer pressure to point people in the direction of worshiping and bending the knee to the empire and the emperor. So Revelation calls readers and hearers to resist the Roman Empire and its claim to God's throne. And as I made the case in the last couple of days, is that Revelation is symbolic and it is meaningful in any age. So it is calling us to resist empire, both then and now. All of what we read today is applicable in our world if we're reading this historically and metaphorically. So the book of Revelation encourages Christians to resist the Roman Empire in every century and in every society in which it arises. Domitian exists today, or many Domitians. The Roman Empire exists today in many forms. So the question I have here is, where do we see the emergence of the Roman Empire in our century, in our world? And you can go back to the previous century too, because many of us are old enough to remember it. But where do you see empire emerging in our world?
Well, if you're in any other country besides the United States, I think it would be much more clear.
Yes.
That when you're a farmer in Guatemala trying to sell your crops, dealing with the economics of American trade laws, there's a lot of power that other nations recognize that we have and we don't. It's kind of like
So you're saying we're in the center of the empire, and therefore we don't see...
Right, it's a whole lot harder to see because we're the beneficiaries instead of the victims of it.
Robert, you...
Oh, no.
Okay. Cole? Okay, look like... I'm sorry, what is your name?
Clay.
Clay, looked like you were about ready to say something. So, no? Okay.
I would say like major oil producing companies or any countries that are heavily involved in the drug trade.
Oh, yeah. Very, very much so. Yeah. Okay. Dubai. Some of the oil-rich Middle Eastern states. Dubai now is they're having conflict with some of the other rich oil-producing states in the Middle East. That's where Al Jazeera is located, isn't it? That's Dubai, right? I got that right. Yeah. Okay. In the previous century, it was very obvious. I mean, we had the rise of fascism in Italy with Mussolini, the rise of the Third Reich with Hitler. We had the emergence of the Soviet Union under Stalinism. Those empires are very obvious to us in retrospect. The empire of Japan, where Emperor Hirohito was thought to be a god. Now, in our world, there's a political leader who is thought to be a god. Where is that? North Korea. North Korea is almost like I could take stuff out of North Korea and line it up almost perfectly with what is being said about the Roman Empire. That's very dangerous. I mean, when your leader is God, you've got to obey everything they say. And their information is totally controlled. At least that's the information we get in the West. So any other place where we see empire? We've named the United States, several of the ones I've listed. We look at major industries like oil-producing industries, drug trade, and so forth. So that's right. That's where we need to see it. And as Christians, we're being called to resist. Yes?
One of the things that...
microphone.
One of the things that I find interesting is that when you look at this concept of empire, in the time that John is writing here, the locus of empire is Rome. In our day, empire has changed. The Red Dragon has changed the way it's done, and so the locus of empire there is no single locus. There are several loci. And we've mentioned some of them. And we have competing empires. Russia is once again trying to become what it always wanted to be, which is a great world power. We have China. We have the corporate world. All of these, and I'm not quite sure whether they are the first beast or as aspects of the second beast. I'm not sure how exactly, but understanding that empire still exists, but it changes its face. Because when it becomes, Rome becomes too obvious. This is the center. This is the locus of empire. So this is who we resist. Well, let's spread it out a little bit.
Right.
So nobody's really quite sure who to resist.
Yeah. Excellent insight and points. Now, to oversimplify, the people living in Asia Minor didn't know anything about the Empire of China or anything in Asia or Africa or let alone the Americas. So from their perspective, they were the world and Rome was the center. So there were other empires at the time, but as far as they were concerned, that was the only empire that was oppressing them. And so for us, we live in America, not China, not Russia. And look, let me just speak candidly. Among some Mennonites, it's let's hate America first. The fact is, though, there are many other empires that are, like Russia is very dangerous, I think. China, North Korea, Iran, these are dangerous worlds. I think that empire operates very much in North Korea for the North Koreans. North Koreans probably don't know anything about people who live in the United States or Russia or China. They are enveloped by empire there. Let's pray for the Christians there. That must be horrible. But you make a really good point. Thanks for bringing that out. Yeah.
The most amazing thing that I see, I want to speak a little louder just so that you can pick it up, is the trance-like way that the population is controlled. I mean, you would think that the North Korean people, for instance, seeing Kim Jong-un doing what he's doing and starving millions of his people in order to build up his arms race, you would think somebody would have the guts, like in a good movie, to go over there and just stab the guy, kill him, hit him over the head with a rock. But it's like everybody's in this trance. We don't care how evil this guy is. We like him. Is that a spiritual blindness as well?
Oh, I think that hits the nail on the head. Yeah, it is. You look at the Third Reich. I mean, the German people were smart people.
Good people.
And
Christian people.
Good people, Lutherans, and they were just swept up.
Mennonites, too.
And unfortunately, Mennonites colluded with the Third Reich. And they were swept up in the mesmerization of these autocratic, charismatic leaders who collected wealth and power over a period of time. And we see it happening. You know, in the Third Reich, you had Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who refused to swear a loyalty oath to Hitler. He went underground. Karl Barth signed the Barmen Declaration, which were pastors that refused to give their loyalty oath to the Fuhrer. But most of the Lutheran pastors gave oaths of allegiance to Hitler. Good grief, they never read Revelation.
No, they read Romans 13.
They read Romans 13, and like Luther, they marginalized Revelation. Well, again, very good points. Yeah. What other comments do you have about? When I was working on this, I thought about things like, what is totalitarianism? So I looked up some stuff on it, read some books on it. What is fascism? You know, the rise of fascism all over the world with Erdogan in Turkey. I forget the name of the leader in Belarus. They're democratically elected, but now they're becoming fascist dictators. You looked at Duterte in the Philippines, and we look at the rise of nationalism in Europe and the movement toward very charismatic, autocratic leaders. Are we moving toward a new fascist era like the 1920s and 30s? You know, I'm worried about that. So that's why I was looking at fascism. I have some notes on there and what it is. And then I go down and I look at the market god, which is, for many Americans, the market itself is a god. The stock market is something we create. Human beings created the stock market. Now, no individual controls it. No corporation controls it. No political leader on planet Earth controls it. It's like it has its personality in its own. And I know people that wake up in the morning, and the first thing they do is they check the markets, because the markets run 24 hours. They wake up and they look at the Nikkei average. They look at what happened in Europe. They start looking at the market trends at 8, 9, 10 in the morning, and they check it all day long. And the last thing they do at night is they check the markets, because they're addicted to serving the market god. That's another type of totalitarianism. And it's just not one nation like the United States. These markets are global and all-consuming.
Or Facebook.
Yes, you can do the same thing. Yeah, your smartphone. You wake up in the morning, you check some apps. You know, people do with like I have political apps. I have news apps. So I can check those all day long and just be filled with the political trivia all day long. What did Donald Trump say today? What did he tweet? What is CNN blasting him about now? And on it goes. You get swept up in that type of idolatry. You know, there's 168 hours in a week. If you spend 2 hours a week going to church and 166 watching the market, looking at the news feeds, watching Twitter or social media, you know who your God is. It's lip service to God, and it is devotion to one of these other entities. That's the danger we live in. Yes?
Is it okay if I check on my stocks one time a week?
Well, you know, look, Vanjie and I have mutual funds, and I have an app, and of course, at the close of every day, I check. I do it. But there's some real danger there. And the thing is, when we lend our money to corporations, those corporations use that money for all kinds of things. So I try very hard not to invest in companies that are involved in arms trade, cigarette companies I try to get out of, the things that are really harmful to human beings. So that is how I justify investment into the market. So you can check your... I would say, yeah, you and I can do it together. So, yes.
One question about the description of fascism.
Yeah.
Did you describe our situation today and apply it to fascism, or did you do the reverse?
Well, here's what I did is, okay, look, I saw the Republican and Democratic debates leading up to the election, and I saw some trends there that worried me considerably. And when I looked around the world and I saw these trends actually happening, materializing in Europe and other places, I started thinking about Mussolini, the great fascist. I saw a lot of similarities between Mussolini and some of these other leaders. So then I said, well, what is fascism? So I went back and I did some looking. So here's our 8 characteristics of fascism. First, there's a distrust of reason. It's anti-rationalistic. Distrusts reasons. It stresses the irrational and the sentimental. So it's a rejection of the elite, Harvard-educated people. It's a rejection of the experts that might actually work for the government. It's a rejection of people that have been in the CIA for their lifetime and know a lot more about international security than a particular political person. It's a rejection of reason. And then the second thing is, it's a denial of basic human equality. Fascist societies define itself as ideal and superior, and non-members are inferior. Fascism reject the Jewish Christians and Greek concept of equality. Well, and what they do is they stress exceptionalism. We're the exceptional race. We're the exceptional country. We're the exceptional people.
So is the question, is healthcare right for all?
Yeah,
Would it fall under this?
Exactly, right. Who deserves health care? Well, the ones that have money that can afford it. If you can't afford it, you're not working hard enough. You don't deserve it. You're out. So this is a denial of basic human equality. Third is a code of behavior based on lies and violence. This is historically speaking. Politics is considered by friendly enemy relations. The enemy must be annihilated. In contrast, democracies envision opponents and loyal opposition. Concentration camps and slave labor camps are at the core of the fascist world. Mass murder, torture, shock troops, and even in peace times. So what happens here is that you're either with us or against us. If you're with us, then you're part of us. But if you oppose us, you're the enemy, and you should be destroyed. And we have sanction to destroy you because you're not part of us, because we're God's people. We're the exceptional country. Or number 4, government by an elite group. Only a small minority of the population, qualified by birth, education, social standing, and wealth, is capable of understanding what is best for the entire population. The fascist leader is viewed as infallible and represents the public interest. So we have trends where there is a concentration of wealth and power, and they go together. In our society, we have wealthy corporations who fund political campaigns. The politicians go to Congress, and they pass laws and legislation and regulations that benefit the corporations that put them into power. This is the corporate state. So there's certain political parties that say, this party wants big state, lots of regulations, they want a big government. But that party itself is a state corporation with collusion. It's just a different state. One is a social state, one might be more of a corporate state. And then there's totalitarianism. Dictators are concerned only with government, but totalitarian seeks to control all aspects of life, including education, religion, business. Totalitarian uses any form of coercion, from verbal threats to mass murder, to attain its goals, all forms of social relations, whether political or not. The authoritarianism is reflected in the patriarchy of the family. So you can imagine the patriarchal father. His point of view is it. The mother, the children have to obey. If they don't, they're enemies of the family. And there are certain people who rise in corporations or political environments who see that as the image that they have to imitate. And they want absolute loyalty from their family members. Another one, 6, racism, nationalism, imperialism. 7, opposition to international law and order. In other words, we set what is right and wrong, good and bad law. We don't go to The Hague and international law. We don't get censored or reprimanded by anybody, the UN. 8, fascist economics, the corporate state. This is true of Italy. Corporate state, let me get this a little bigger here. Corporate state implies fascist principles of organization and control of the economy. The individual should not be politically articulate citizen, but only a worker, farmer, doctor, or whatever might contribute to the corporate state. So in our society right now, you're either a consumer or a producer. If you consume, that's good for corporations. They make money. If you're a producer, that's good because the corporation can sell your product. Your good is simply related to the corporation that makes money. That's a primary value in North American society as I see it. If you're somebody who just lives off of welfare or is just old and needs Social Security, what is your value to the corporate state? You know, that is kind of a trend that I've seen. Only members of the ruling elite were supposed to understand how the entire society was governed. So everything becomes compartmentalized. And you only know your little bit, and they know their little bit, but who knows everything? It would be the ruling elite. And we find this in governments all the time. So anyway, those are the 8 elements of fascism that I think that I've gotten on several sources on the internet. I'm not a political theorist at all. Some of you may have much more expertise in this, but Ron, you asked the question. What were you thinking?
You look too close to home. That's why I raised the question.
Well, and I don't know you guys personally. In my own church, I just speak what I think, and it's my proposal and viewpoint. And there are people in my church who disagree with me. So, do you feel free to just say a little bit more about that, or where do you see this close to home, or am I putting you in peril?
No, we're all comfortable disagreeing with each other.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Good. Because, yeah, good. Okay, so go for it. Yeah. What do you see close to home here? Can you? Michelle might be able to help you out, I think.
Well, the distrust of reason, that's coming up all the time, particularly in the last thing. We distrust science. We distrust, they're all wrong. And of course, equality is a renewed issue. We thought we were getting better on equality, and now we're going downhill.
Yeah.
Of course, governed by an elite group. That's been a long time.
Totalitarianism. Yeah.
My tongue's not working today. Totalitarianism, probably not as much, but certainly racism and nationalism, imperialism, America first.
Yeah.
That's how can the Christian, as a group, affirm that when our ties are all around the world and not just in one particular nation?
The love of God knows no boundaries or borders. The love of God is borderless. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, two really quick points. See if you have any comments on this. Ayn Rand, okay?
Who?
Ayn Rand.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Atlas Shrugged, my absolutely favorite book, my absolutely favorite movie, okay?
Wow.
The points made in that, to me, I totally agree with.
Yeah.
You may not, that's okay, but that's where I stand. The other thing is this. I like movies, and a lot of guys like movies that have to do with Count of Monte Cristo, the old one, black and white. In the modern era, The Punisher, because we see everybody, the powers that be, the powers that control everything, corrupt, always doing wrong against the general public, and we're sick of it. And so guys like The Punisher come in and say, let me take care of this. So we kind of applaud these movies because it makes us feel vicariously like we're doing something about it. So what do you have to say about when a major power gets too, and that's totally in quotation marks, gets too powerful? What about vengeance through Punisher? He's a what?
Right.
Well,
he's an avenger.
He's an avenger, but
Yeah.
That wasn't
It's-
the word I'm looking
it's-
for, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And then on the other thing, Ayn Rand, if you have anything on that philosophy, I'd kind of like to know.
Well, that's interesting. Did anybody have some responses? I have some. I have plenty, but this is an opportunity for you. Yeah.
I'm not going to go off on Ayn Rand, but
The problem, one of the basic problems of opposition to the violence of the state or the oppressor, of responding with violence, is that it only accomplishes one thing: it puts the bottom rail on the top.
Yeah. Right.
Those who were the oppressed take up arms, defeat the oppressor, and in turn become the oppressor. And this is why you can't grow democracy out of the barrel of a gun. You can't destroy oppression out of the barrel of a gun, because once you do that, and it becomes a cycle of one empire, the Roman Empire displacing the Babylonian Empire, if you will, if we can use that metaphor. It's still the same. It's just somebody else's. Okay. So I'm oppressed today. I take up arms. I defeat the people. I defeat Scott, who's oppressing me. Now I oppress him.
Yeah.
That's good for me because I'm no longer being oppressed. But it ain't too good for Scott because now he's the one.
Right.
He just thinks it's good for him. I'll be after him next.
Oh, the cycle continues.
That's right.
The cycle continues.
So is he saying, is he implying that anybody taking up against Mussolini or against Hitler and what they're doing is bad?
Okay, well, look, there's nonviolent resistance, and there are plenty of books written about how to do that. There's one guy, Gene Scott, I forget his name, written 3 volumes on nonviolent methods. He lists 168 different methods of nonviolent tactics to use against oppressors. I think that's remarkable, and he cites instances in World War II where that worked. So I know about, and there are many studies now, you just look it up on the internet, and it's about why nonviolence works. You find study after study suggesting this. The problem is the people in power use violence to maintain and sustain their power, so they don't want to do that. And it's better if they gin up some foreign war to send people to unite our country. You know, that is, they're using violence. Now, as far as the comments you made about the Punisher, I want to make a comment about Walter Wink wrote about the myth of redemptive violence. And that is that we think in our culture that when we have a horrible situation in violence, we need to have stronger, more overwhelming violence to take them over. And most of our movies are this way. You know, you mentioned the Punisher. The Punisher, he's a former FBI agent. His family is killed by criminals. He recovers. He goes out and he kills all the people who killed his family. And we sit there and go, oh, good. We don't have to do anything. We can just eat our M&Ms and drink our coffee. And the myth of redemption, not violence, is shot through with most of the films that are produced today. Somehow or another, it's a myth that we have, and it comforts us, I guess, or entertains us. So, is that what you're thinking?
No, I was thinking was vigilante.
Yes.
Vigilantism is not. I disagree with Mike here. Is not necessarily I'm going to overpower you and get even, and I'm going to take over and I'm going to be the oppressor. I don't think all vigilantes want to be oppressor. They simply want to get even. Because you killed my family, you kill them in front of me one at a time, and I want to get you back. And that's it. And it is right there.
Okay, yeah, that's the myth of redemptive violence. In other words, somehow or another, using violence rights the world. It's kind of
if the right people, the right people using violence. We hear this all the time from our politicians. Talking about going back to John Kerry, we're going to find all these terrorists and kill them.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, because that's not the way you overcome.
Go ahead. Yes, Ron.
And we have a very specific example in our own history. We got rid of Britain rule by going out and getting our muskets loaded and shooting people.
Yeah.
Canada did the same thing without war.
Yeah. We were founded on violence. It doesn't surprise me that violence is built into the national DNA.
The thing is that the revolution, the American Revolution, really only changed who was in charge. It was basically a coup d'etat.
Yeah.
It was not a revolution. The true revolution came without violence, and that was with the adoption of the Constitution.
But because we became a country of rule of law rather than monarchy. Rather than one person dictating, we now claim to be a country of rule of law. And that was definitely a step forward. And the French Revolution did the same thing. So, Ayn Rand, you didn't want to talk about it. Maybe you guys have had discussions before, but could you just very succinctly tell us why Ayn Rand is on your mind in this context?
Well, she came out of despotic Russia.
Yes.
Came here, wrote this book, Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a symbolism. It's a metaphor of the world being held up by only a certain few.
Okay.
And so the producers, the ones that are willing to work hard versus the lazy people, and I'm talking about not all of the people on welfare, but the lazy people like I ran into constantly in California. I just want my check. I want my free check, and you have nothing to do with it. I say, buddy, who do you think earned the money to give you your free check?
Okay, gotcha.
So what Ayn Rand does in this book is basically gives credit to the producers, to the hard workers, to the ones who are really earning the money, and says to the other ones, do your part to get out of the way.
There's a certain sense of fairness there, and self-responsibility, and not relying on others. And that is the individualism of Ayn Rand, ethical egoism. I've not read Atlas Shrugged or her books, but I've read about her. It might surprise you, I consider myself to be a libertarian like Ayn Rand, but a socialist. I'm a libertarian socialist. And so it combines two oxymoronic political categories. And you know what that used to be called? If you read Noam Chomsky, this is peace anarchism, peaceful anarchism. So I'm a Christian anarchist.
So you like Noam Chomsky?
I do, very much. Now, Nick and I had a long conversation yesterday, very helpful. I'm writing a book on Christian anarchism, and my first chapter is on anarchy. Let me give you a counter story to Ayn Rand coming out of Russia. Out of Russia came Emma Goldman. She came to the United States, immigrated here. She worked as a wage slave in the late 1800s. She got out of that, joined the Labor Party movement, was influenced by a guy named Most who believed in violent anarchism. She and her boyfriend went out and colluded to kill a great industrialist named Frick. Her boyfriend went in and shot him, didn't kill him. He went to jail for 20 years. She didn't learn her lesson. She started promoting anarchism. In 1901, she gave a lecture. And one of the persons listening at the lecture, 3 weeks later, went and shot and killed President McKinley. At that point, Ayn Rand saw the futility, Emma Goldman saw the futility of violence. And from that point on, she became a proponent of nonviolence. And when World War I started, now this is a woman that came out of Russia, same thing. World War I started, she was considered herself to be a conscientious objector. And she was put in prison for that. Then she was deported from the United States. She went back to Russia, stood before Lenin's desk and talked to Lenin. She thought what was going on in the Soviet Union was great, the Bolshevik Revolution. But he was all for violence. She left in haste. She came back to the West and spoke out against the evils of the Soviet Empire. So there's a person that knew very well Russia and the Soviet Union, emerging Soviet Union. Unlike Ayn Rand, talked about peace and nonviolence, and she talked about the importance of taking care of fellow workers. She uses a lot of language that sounds like Mennonites, by the way. So that's a counter story. Yeah.
And I would like Nick to remember that this is still not only the U.S., there are other countries, but we're still one of the countries that people that live in oppressive areas of the world want to escape to. So we still have goodness in us. And we still have the freedom that gives those people that feel like they're on the bottom the chance not to be there.
Yeah.
And not relating to the Mennonites, keeping them out of it. This is an example. Whenever I talk to Jehovah's Witnesses, and we won't salute the flag, I said, that's fine. And they have a whole lot of things against a lot of things, especially the military. And I tell them this, it's easy for you to say because you've got these guys in uniform protecting your rights. If they weren't here,
now
ISIS would come down here and chop their head off too.
There is a counter argument to that, and that is that when we have military bases in 180 countries around the world, we're actually stirring up violence worldwide and hatred toward the United States. So our military, contrary to preserving us, is actually harming us. They're creating resentment and violent attitudes toward us as a whole. That's a counter argument. I don't know which is the better argument.
That's an extension.
Totally so I'm just as a thinker, I want to not just jump to one side or the other. But there are some counter arguments to that. How many of you have lived in other countries? How many? Yes. How many of you were born in other countries? Where were you born?
In the United States.
Okay. You lived in other countries, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were you born in the United?
I'm here full time.
Full time. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, this is a resident alien here. She's not a U.S. citizen. Yeah. So we lived in England for a while. We lived in a compound with people living from all over the world. And when I came back to the United States, I said, I'm glad I'm back in the United States. 5 years in England was. I like what we have. There's so many good things about the United States. Many people want to come to the United States. Many of my friends that live overseas, the United States has got a lot of great things. So the great things we have are counterbalanced by we have the potential to do great harm. That's what it is. Yes?
Along with what she said, too, my question...
Microphone.
My question is, how do we hold in balance Romans 13, where we're told to be good citizens, and how do we show our appreciation and our love for our country in respect, and yet point out the things that that are ungodly? Because so many times I hear Christians that they want to make the point, that of what's wrong in our country, and there's plenty of points there, but they do it with such venomous attitudes of hatred that I don't see that that's biblical either, or the way to me that's violence, maybe a passive violence. I don't know if there is such a thing, but how do we hold both of these chapters in tandem? How do we respect our government and yet when we're called to Revelations,
I suspect it's like a lot of things in life. It's a little bit of a balancing act. I mean, life is full of contradictions, and we have to decide what is right for us, and in God's eyes, that's going to lead us through those contradictions.
Yeah. Let your conscience be your guide, and don't let any authority tell you what to do. That's a basic anarchist principle. But also collaborate with other people, like we're doing right now. Get feedback from others, discern God's will collectively and not in isolation. In isolation, we're always going to, I think, go off the path. But that's the tough thing: is how do you walk on the narrow path with the complexities that we have to deal with here?
And keep Jesus in focus as Lord.
Yeah.
Everything is related to that.
If I was walking up on a lady getting beat up and a couple of guys were trying to rape her, and the only thing I knew I could do is I got to hit these guys, got to hit them hard. If they go down, they go down.
Yeah.
That's violence. But how else can I help? Do I intercede by saying, boys, come on, Jesus said it. They're not listening to me. So I guess there's a time when you have to use some judgment, make your own choices, and hope that you came out good, because you didn't mean to hurt anybody, but you had to in order to stop that violence, which was totally unjust.
Right. This is the kind of what-if scenario. What if somebody broke into your house and was about to assault your grandmother? Aren't you going to shoot them? And I would say, well, I might not have a gun, so can I lasso them with my rope? They said, well, that's pretty unpractical. They said, okay, well, can I sound the fire alarm and turn on the... So there's all kinds of alternative ways to deal with violence that may not be violent. Now, and John Howard Yoder wrote a book called... What was the title of the book, Nick? What If? It's a little book we read. What would you do if? What would you do if? And in there, he looks at all of these dilemmas where it looks like we have to choose violence to solve the problem. And he goes and he says, no, we need to be creative thinkers. We need to respond in nonviolent ways that can help. Now, in that situation, I've actually been in situations like that. And I've never had to resort to violence. I've had my life threatened. I've had guns pointed in my face 5 times when I managed pizza parlors in California. I had a person that came in, he was going to kill me. And you know what I did? In the pizza parlor, I went back in the walk-in refrigerator, called the police. The police came, they arrested him. When they arrested, honestly, because he was going to kill me. So, I'm not a coward. I was a wrestler. I was a very good wrestler. I wanted to take him on. But I knew that would just make things worse. So, I think there are some ways that we can counter violence in nonviolent ways. So, that would be my response, yes.
Do I need the microphone?
Okay. And we're getting close to the noon time. So, Nick, why don't you keep an eye on that?
I don't.
Oh, it is. Okay.
There's a video called "A Perfect Grace," I think. I hope that's the right title. But it takes place in Chicago, probably 20 years ago now. There was a gang shooting, drive-by shooting, and this young teenager was killed. And the mother of the killed child went to the jail and met her son's killer and forgave him. And her rationality was, I have sinned and God has forgiven me, so I need to forgive you. And I think she kept visiting that young man in jail.
And she what?
She kept visiting the young man in jail.
Right, yeah.
And then on a lighter note, when we lived in Bluffton, Ohio, Abby was in the high school band, and she's in a wheelchair. And they must have had band first thing in the morning, and they said they pledged allegiance to the flag. Well, the year went on. At the end of the year, this young man that stood beside Abby, well, she couldn't stand up, so she sat in her wheelchair. But she didn't say the pledge. And this young man raised up his hand. Mrs. Bittinger, Abby's not saying the pledge. She said, yes, I know. There was 4 Mennonite church in the area, and she understood that why Abby did not say the pledge. So I thought that was kind of a fun story that we found out.
Well, thanks for sharing. I think we're out of time, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you very much for having us here. And this is the greatest compliment I can give. I wish our church lived closer to yours so we could collaborate. But it's a 10.5-hour drive, so if you're in Wichita, you better contact me. I feel like I'm part of your family, by the way, so thanks for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the intellectual stimulation of this whole time and looking at things on another level. And God continue to bless and use all of you. We need you here.
He still lets me come, so I guess.
Well,